Welcome to Wire Girls. This tutorial is, well, it looks very much like the stacked bangles that are very popular at the moment, but it's actually all made in one. As you can see, you've got this sort of very pretty beaded areas through the middle and then a couple of plain bits. We're going to be using 3 different gauges of wire, so 14, 20 and 26, which is 1.6, 0.8 and 0.4 mil round wire, and I've used 4 mil beads, and this is the sort of thing we're going to be making. It's a really sturdy bracelet. The 14 gauge wire really adds strength to it, and the clasp there in the back just opens that way, but the one that I'm going to make next, I'm going to open it the other way so you can see that you can sort of do either with it. It doesn't need like a hook and eye, it just needs this sort of fancy eye piece, and it works really well. So rather than start with the actual lengths of wire, I've already cut them, and I've cut them sort of just under 7 inches because that's the sort of length I want the bracelet. But what we're going to do first is we're actually going to make the clasp first. When you start any bracelet, if it needs to be a particular size, you can see the clasp here it's quite a large size. So if you don't take that into consideration when you're making the bracelet, you're not going to get it the right size. So the easiest way is to make your clasp first. Now I'm going to start and I'm going to make a reasonably small one. So I'm going to cut a piece of the 14 gauge or the 1.6 mil wire, and I'm going to cut that at 2.5 inches. There we go. And it's a nice little strong piece of wire. So you're going to need some round nose pliers or some shaped pliers. I have some bezel pliers here, and I could go around the smaller of the 2 bits, or I could just use the larger end of my round nose pliers. So grip that roughly in the middle, move those out of the way, and then just bend over the jaws of the plier. I'm using the plier as a stable thing. I'm just going to trim that end, it's not quite straight. There we go. I use the pliers as the stable area, and I use my fingers to bend the wire over it. Now I could leave this like this and just curl it round, but to tell you the truth, I do like to add a little bit more detail, so I'm just going to hammer the ends. Now look at the angle, so I've got the wire straight up, and I'm flattening down there in the middle. Now I'm going to turn it. Let me just open this out a bit, you'll be able to see what I'm doing better. There. So I'm just flattening that by beating the end of the wire. It will take quite a lot of stick with this because it's a heavy gauge wire at 1.6, so you can, you know, give it some welly, which means you can hit it quite hard. And then I'm doing the other side. I'm using a little steel block here. If you don't have a steel block, anything that's firm, you know, a chopping board or something like that, or an outdoor piece of stone or a step, you know, anything like that. The edges are quite sharp when I've finished. So taking a file and just smoothing and rounding them. Just rounding them off. They can be a little bit jagged and lumpy when you're beating them with the pliers, so this way it just neatens them up and makes them nice and rounded. The last thing you want is anything sharp on your piece of jewellery, so we'll just file those off. I will often make lots of these and pop them away in a jam jar or something like that for use later, and I will throw them through the tumbler. Now when I tumble these, I do tumble them with shot in water rather than the wire jewellery, which I tumble dry, mainly because this is so much stronger. It needs something a bit more, you know, positive. So round those pliers onto that flat edge that I've just flattened, and then I'm going to curl that round and upwards, and I'm going to curl that all the way around until it touches the wire. That might be a little bit little. Let me just do the other side. So a little bit lower this time on the jaws. So I'm right down at the thickest part of the jaw. And we'll curl that round. Yeah, you can see that that's a little bit small. So back in, open it out, slide it down the jaws, and then tighten back up so it touches. Now I'm going to bring these two ends together. I'm going to have to grip them in the pliers because this wire, normally I could just do that with my fingers, but it's such a heavy, it takes some squeezing, does that? Right, I've gone a little bit too far, so let's open these out a bit. Pliers on either side and just open. And then flatten them and neaten that up. And that's quite cute, and you could leave it at that stage. Or you can add some more hammering. So I am hammering, whoop, it's escaping. I'm hammering the curve at the top, flat. That's quite cute. There we go. This will add strength to your clasp, but it's not really about the strength. The wire is so heavy that it's perfectly strong enough on its own. It's just that I like the way it looks, to tell you the truth. I like the flattened piece. So now I could hammer the backs of the circles as well along this top edge. Now you might find it easier if you take whatever you're hammering right to the edge of the piece, then you can hold on to it, you can get your fingers in there without, you know, missing and smacking your thumbnail, which I do on a regular basis. But this is probably a little bit safer if you want to be careful. So there we go. So I've got the edges hammered of the two curls and the edges of the loop that goes over in the middle. Just give it a bit more stick. Do play with this. Work out, you know, how much you can do, how much you can't do. Just giving that a bit of a rub with a little silver cloth there to clean it up. Now as you can see, it's quite a bit smaller than the one that I made before. So I'm going to show you how to make a bigger one. It's exactly the same way as the one that I've just done, except I'm going to show you now on 3 inches of wire with my snips. There we go. And cut that off. So I've speeded this up a bit because you've already watched me do it once. So I've bent that in half, opened it out, beat the ends, and then I will file them back so that they're not too sharp and they're nicely rounded. There we go. And then round those pliers onto, whoops, it seems like I missed a bit. Anyway, I'm sure you get the idea. So we've got one now that's slightly bigger. So let's just move that onto there and let me show you now the difference in actual size. So the first one I made, I started with a piece of wire that was 2.5 inches long, and I have ended up with a clasp that measures 3/4 of an inch. Then I started with a piece of wire that was 3 inches, and I ended up with a clasp that measured 1 inch. Now yours won't necessarily measure exactly the same as mine. It will depend on the size of your pliers that you've used to make the circles. They might be bigger or smaller. So this is something you will need to do yourself to work out how long they are. So I got some of my 0.4 or 26 gauge round wire, my fine wire, and I've just wrapped it once around a piece of 0.8. Now the 0.8, I have 3 lengths and they're approximately 7 inches long. So there's my 3 lengths, there's my wire in the middle, and then I've got some 4mm beads. Now I must admit, I had the most terrible trouble with these beads. I love these beads. They're like a cat's eye, like a selenite bead, and they're really pretty. But the holes in them are just so annoying. They just don't want to go on the wire. And then what you do is you pull far too far and you knock off the wire at the end. Oh well, let's try again. Maybe it'll go on easier the second time. Let me just straighten that end out. if the end of your wire is slightly crumpled or bent or off shape or anything like that, you're going to find it more difficult to get your beads on. So I'm just straightening that up with a pair of pliers to try and get it nice and even. So I slide my bead up to that finer wire that it puts on, and then I have 2 more wires that go either side. Let's get that all nice and straight. Take your fine wire. This is about 2 foot long, so 60 centimeters, and I'm wrapping over the outside. Sorry, the beads are trying to slide into the way. Over the outside and round the wire that the bead is on, and then back. So you've actually wrapped around 2 wires. You haven't gone in between them or anything like that. You've wrapped around the 2 and then gone back to the side that you first started. I'm just fiddling. It's because my hands are down and underneath the camera, that's all. You'll find this quite easy. So there's my 3rd piece of wire going in, holding it firm, bringing the fine wire around the outside wire, and then I'm taking that down and over the 2 wires. So it's gone over the outside one and the middle one that's got the bead on, and then it's got back to where we started. So we're not doing any figure of 8s, we're not doing any unders and overs, we're just going around the 2 wires. And then I started at the top last time, so I'll do the top wire first this time. So around those 2 and back, and then this one goes around the bottom one and the middle one, so those 2 and back to where I started. Each time you pull the wire back, you're pulling against the other wire, which is helping to hold your bead central and that your wire's nice and neat either side of it. So let's try again. More beads. There we go. Slide it all the way up so it's next to the other one, and then that wire goes over those 2 and back to where we started, and this wire goes over the bottom one and the middle one, those 2 and back to where it started. And I'm just going to continue to do this, adding beads until I want my finished length of my bracelet to be approximately 7 inches. So for this to sort of go in the middle and have the clasp there and everything else, I only need maybe just under 6 inches worth of beaded wire. You could do this less if you wanted, just to have the beads along the top. You could have just plain down the sides. That really doesn't matter. It's one of those things you can play with. You don't have to have just one colour of bead either. These bracelets are really pretty if you use either a graduated, moving from, sort of pinks into reds, into purples, into blues, then you can sort of go into greens and into yellows. That looks gorgeous. You could like a rainbow going across. Or you could use the chakra colours if you're, sort of really into the crystal healing and things like that. I just speeded this up a little bit, because I'm only doing the same thing over and over. It's actually quite nice just to sit there and do lengths of this. You can always, you could use this on its own. You wouldn't need to use the 2 thicker wires that I'm going to use on the outside. It's reasonably, sort of another one that just won't go on. Slide. There are some beads that pose no problems at all. I mean, you get things like hematite or metal beads, and they're always going on. And then you get some things like, for me, it tends to be garnets. Garnets are always terrible about getting them to actually go on. Oops, just trying to kink there. Go on. Sometimes you can use, if you have any like Renaissance wax, and you can actually spread that down the length of your wire, and it help ease, if they're just tight and it just wants something to sort of ease the way through. It's a little bit like, oiling the works type thing. But you do need to be careful you don't get too much on, because you don't want it sort of squidging up between your beads or anything like that. So I'm still working the same way. Middle bead on. Wire over the top of those two. Make sure it's out of the way. And then this wire goes over the top and around those two. I'm going to try the Renaissance wax. Push the beads out the way. Right, let's just smear some of that on. So that's a little bit on my finger. And I'm just smearing it up and down. I'm just going to see if it helps. But it's only a tiny bit, only on the edge of my finger. Move that out of the way. Right, let's see if these go on. Any better? Maybe I just got a good bead. You can't tell. So I'll wrap that round. So I'm just going to keep going now, and I'm going to keep doing the same thing, adding the bead on and wrapping the finer wire around. And I've finished now, and I've got probably about 5 and a bit inches, and that's fine. That's plenty enough. I just want this to be the central section of the bracelet. Now to finish these ends off, I'm going to keep wrapping around as if there was a bead in there, but because there isn't, what that will do is as I pull that tight, it will start to bring all the wires together. To keep opening up these end bits so that I can actually get in, because without a bead there to hold it all open, it tends to close up on you. And actually it's a really attractive weave, is this, even without a bead in. It does look very nice. So I'm just going over the bottom two and back, over the top two and back, and just keeping going like that. And I'm just going to do that for a little distance. And it's almost my way of finishing this wire off and making everything neat. If you don't like that, if you don't find that bit attractive, you can just wrap your wires around the outer edges and leave them like that. I'm just pushing that up nice and tight with my pliers. I might go around a few more times. This is entirely up to you. Once you've got sort of 2 or 3 on, the weaving is going to be quite stable. So then you can finish off by wrapping around the outer wires without really having to do much more to it. It's really entirely up to you. This is where your own personality, your own individuality comes into things. So let me have a look at the other end. Now, when we look at the other end, of course we don't have a spare wire there. We've just got the bead. And if you were to pull them together, it would look a little bit odd because the other end is woven. So I'm going to cut a piece of this wire off. Obviously, if you didn't have enough, you just cut yourself another length. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the middle of the piece of wire. I'm going to wrap it around that middle piece, just the same way that we started when we originally put the bead on. Push that down and then wrap over the outer and the middle, and then the outer and the middle from the top, taking the wire back so that I can match that weave up to the weave that's on the other side. We'll just speed that up a little bit. Now I know that I haven't got my ends quite even. Again, doesn't matter. I only need a small amount to attach it to the heavier gauge wire. So I'm finishing that off by going around the outer edge and trimming it off and smoothing it down. And then we'll do the same on the other side. So all I'm doing is I'm wrapping around that outer wire. In a way, this is like the cast off stitch, if you like. We go around 3 or 4 times and it holds everything nice and firm. So trim that as close as I can and then smooth that down with my pliers. Lovely. I've probably got maybe half an inch at the end there, maybe just over a centimetre. But that's fine. It's, you know, sufficient for what we need it to do. So I have my 2 outer wires Now, if I put those on as they are, nice and circular, they look very shiny, it's very pretty, they're great, and you could do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to beat mine up with a hammer to get a hammered finish on the wire. Let me show you on this one. I don't know. It's actually a little bit dirty as this one. I've been wearing it and I haven't given it a good clean. Shame on me. I don't know whether you can see there in the light, you get this hammered effect. I like that. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to bring my steel block back in. I'm going to smooth the end out just the same way we did. Do you remember when we were making the catch and we made that end really nice and smooth? Well, I'm going to do that on both ends. Sorry, I haven't got it quite in shot here, but you've got a good idea what I'm doing. I'm just spraying it with a hammer. And then I am hitting all the way up the length so that I get a nice textured appearance. Now you'll find it probably bends your wire. Your wire will start to curve up as you're hammering. Let's do the other one. And I'm doing exactly the same with the other one. I am just hammering the length of the wire after hammering the ends nice and flat. I've hammered the ends flat because again they're going to be curled, they're going to be rolled over, and it's so much easier to do it once you've flattened the wire down. Just easier to manipulate. So I will file those ends off just like we did when we did the catch right at the beginning. I'm just smoothing them round and making sure that there's no little sharp bits or anything like that on the ends. That's it. And the same with the other end. Once that's done and you've got that nice and smooth, if you can't get it smooth with a file or you don't have a file, you could use a little bit of wet and dry paper. I'm not sure what they call that in the States. I think they probably call it glass paper or something like that. Just something to smooth it down, to file it down. But if you have old nail file, emery boards, they'll do the trick just as well. We're only taking off any little sharp bits. It's not like we're trying to totally reshape the metal with this file. We are just making it smooth to make sure that there's nothing that's going to catch when you wear it. There is nothing worse than putting on a piece of jewellery and finding that you've got a little sharp sticky bit that's going to dig in and scratch or something like that. Especially if it's tiny, because it only appears occasionally. So I'm just going to straighten these back out now because they got a little bit curved when I was beating them up with the hammer. You can do that with your fingers. You could do that with plastic jawed pliers. You could do that by putting a cloth over your hand and pulling the wire through the cloth. So many different ways. Let's just ease that and give it a rub while I'm at it. Plastic jawed pliers are probably your best. I do like plastic jawed pliers. They are rather wonderful. Or nylon jawed pliers, depending where you are in the world. So I've got 2 thick wires and then I've got my 3 thin. So I'm going to take one of my thinner wires just from the edge, and all I'm going to do is wrap it over, and then I'm just wrapping that around the thicker wire to anchor that central piece in place. I'm using pliers so that I get it nice and tight. This is not going to slip off because we hammered the end. So that end piece is actually slightly thicker than the rest of the wire. Now it's fatter, it's splayed out. So even if you do these wires a little bit loose, it's not going to slide down and over the top. So I'm now going to do the same on the other side. Put that in place and wrap this wire around. I'm only going around a couple of times, and then trimming off and flattening down with a pair of pliers. Nice and smooth. Now you've got your central wire in the middle, but I'm just going to ignore that for a moment, and I'm going to do the other side. So let me just... Whoops! Sometimes if you push down on your wires without properly supporting them with your fingers, they bend like that. So let's just get the end wire from that side and the end wire from this side. Keep it all straight in my fingers. And then wrap around. If you find it easier, you could use low-tack tape to hold everything in place while you were working doing this. You know, one of the ones that they use to, you know, for painting, for getting outlines and not going too far, but not too sticky one. If you don't have any and you want to use just a normal sellotape, a normal sticky tape, if you actually stick it to something else first, like say, I tend to use the leg of my jeans and put it, and I stick it onto my leg, and then when I peel it off again, it has a little bit of stickiness remaining, but not too much, so you can use it like that. There's a wonderful little tip. Okay, so I've got that in and smooth and trimmed off, and I still have these middle wires. You could either make a tiny curl with those and cut them off. You could do something decorative. If you wanted, you could deliberately leave a much longer length, and you could weave that back and forth up the beads. But I'm just going to put a tiny little curl in. I'm going all the way around. There we go. Flatten that down, and then I'm just going to wrap that around on that side, around the stronger outer wire, so that it's anchored in place. I haven't left myself a lot of wire to do that, but I will have enough. I just need to give it a little bit of encouragement. There we go. That's nice. Now I have a bit more on the other side, but seeing I've already done a small curve on the other end, I'll just do another small curl on this, but I'll do it as a mirror image so it fastens to the other side of the framework of the bracelet. And we'll just wrap that around the thicker wire. Doesn't want to go through, the end's just bent up. Hang on a minute. Go on. Sometimes they're awkward. They just don't want to do what you want them to do. You haven't to let them win. Come here. That's it. So I'll just trim off the end and just smooth that one down. Make sure there's no little sticky up bits. So you've got your central piece of woven beadwork, which is our focal point, and then you've got two very firm outer wires. I'm just wriggling these so that they're even. That's it. Come on. It's about half. Oh, of course, now I've gone too far. It was just about half a mil, tiny little bit lower than the other, so it's that even. Now what I'm going to do is get my round nose pliers on the end, and I'm going to put a curl on the end of the wire, curving it over, because like that, can you see it's like a hook, it's opened. Don't make this go around and touch, because otherwise there's no way you can actually get your clasp on if you make them go around and touch. There we go. Now where's my clasp gone? There we are. That's the bigger one. I want to use the little one. Now I could put that onto the loop section and bring it round, but I don't know whether you can see clearly, but they're a little bit short of those hooks that are put on because I hammered the circular piece of the hook so well, it's a little big. Let's see if I can make them a bit bigger and if they'll go over. It's alright if they won't, I'll show you what to do if they won't, but let me just see if I can make them bigger. Alright, let's try that. No. No, they're really not big enough. I don't want to go in. Okay, I'll put them on the other way around. So I'll put one in one loop and one in the other, and then I will close those down with my pliers just over the top and squash it all the way in until it's touching. All the way until it's touching. There we go. Make sure that's neat and strong. Now, obviously we can't do the other end until we've bent the thing into a bracelet shape, because you can't tell what you're doing. So I'm just evening that up with fingers. I'm just going to pull that so it's even to its one at the side. I happen to have a pot. This will do. Anything would do. If you have a bracelet mandrel, use that. Or a cup, or a mug, or a bottle. Anything that's strong enough that's round. Piece of wood that happens to be round. Anything. So that's got my rough shape. Then I'm going to use something a bit smaller to bring in the sides of the wrist, because most wrists are oval, not round. And it's quite a strong thing to move, is this. It's quite a hard piece to manipulate. You've got two very thick pieces of wire, and then you've got your beads in the middle. That side's gone a little bit sharp, so I'm just going to ease that. It's slipping about all over the place. Let me have a go with my fingers. There we go. So, I have there. That's better. Wriggle, wriggle. So now I've got these two pieces of wire, and I want them to come together more so that these two hooks are not separated. So I'm just going to pull that one up so they match. And I think what I might do, because I like these to open and sort of flare out a bit, so if I make those pointed, they're more likely to do that. I'm just going to take a scrap piece of the 0.4mm or the 26 gauge, and I'm just going to weave, wrap around 2 or 3 times to get myself started, and then I'm just going to weave in between those two thick wires, and what it will do is it will just add an extra layer, if you like, and hold those two in like a V shape instead of being parallel. If they stay in a V, they're more likely to flare the outer wires, which is what I want. Let's just squeeze that up. Do I need any more? Maybe a little bit. Just wrap that round another couple of times there. This is why I say there are no rights and wrongs with wire making. It really is, well, you kind of make it up as you go along. You look at what you want it to do and then find a way of actually putting the wire in the position of where you want it to be. I want these wires to come together into a V, and the best way for me to do that is to actually anchor them in some way. So using the finer wire to just do a little bit of weaving will give me that. So I'm nearly running out of wire here, so let's just wrap this around a couple of times and make sure it's nice and tight. The less wire I get, the more inclined I am to use my pliers to actually pull it through. It seems to be easier for your fingers. When there's a lot to pull against, it's okay, but when there's a little bit, it's easier to use your pliers. So I'm just going to smooth that bit down, straighten these two up again because they keep wriggling under my fingers. There we go, get those parallel. Round those pliers on the end and create a little hook on each one of them. Again, you don't want this hook to touch because this is the way we're going to fasten our bracelet. Alright, they're even. So they will go into the circle there. I'm just moving that fine wire down a bit. It's just wriggled up. Let's move it back. There we go. So with a little bit more tweaking, and probably for me definitely oxidizing, because I like to oxidize. When this sits on your wrist, it will look like you're wearing 3 separate bracelets and you've stacked them, because you've got the 2 outer ones that flare out, and then your central section you've got with your beads in. And it's lovely. The more it flares into a point, the more it will give you a triangular look rather than a parallel. But that is entirely up to you how you want to shape that. I'm still fiddling with that clasp, but I'm quite happy with that. It does look very pretty. Now let me show you this one. This was with a flattened bead rather than a round one, and they both look really great. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I'm still fiddling there. It's to get the shape right. You'll find wearing it would do the same thing. By the time I slept in that a couple of times, it would be the perfect shape for me. But there we go. So like I say, I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I can't wait to see what you make when you post some photos on our forum, and I look forward to seeing them. Happy wrapping.